I'm Rob Downey, a family practice MD and Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner. I'm coming to you from Seaworthy Functional Medicine in Homer, Alaska. Seaworthy exists to help people overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. How can we go to the next level in our ability to be at peace and utilize the levels of meditation that are available to expand our lives and be the best that we can be and show up the way we want to show up? Today, we could not be more fortunate than to be joined by Bob Martin. Bob, thanks for taking your time to be on the Field Notes podcast today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It really is.
A lot of the experts that I spend time with, I always find myself thinking that their origin stories are kind of like the comic books. You know what I mean? Just there's something about how they got all fired up to do what they do that was heavily influenced by where they started from. And I was noting in your bio as I got ready for today that you were a criminal trial lawyer during a pretty rugged time in Florida. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely accurate. Yeah, during those days of the movie Scarface and the TV show Miami Vice, those really did capture the vibe of those days.
And is that part of? Was this kind of a one-to-one association, like bug to drug for pneumonia, where somebody doing what you did had to meditate to survive, or how's this? How's this fit together?
Well, they didn't happen kind of concurrently like that. One actually led into the other. And I think that there was a bit of arrogance going on there, a bit of being full of myself. I was I wouldn't say I was a top tier lawyer, but I was certainly second tier. Most everybody in Miami knew my name, and I had some pretty important clients, and I got paid a lot of money. I had my house paid off by the time I was 32. So that part of my life was going very, very well. Now, those were the days of the cocaine Cowboys, and those were the days of the discotheques and the chrome and the glass and hanging out with those guys. And let's just say that my behaviors got a little bit excessive. And so that led to a therapist, and then eventually, one step after another, it led to transformation.
So today we're going to be talking about your work in meditation, and you're now a therapist and you're a teacher of this. So not only for your personal benefit, but you've progressed through then a number of dimensions of commitment to this.
Yes, sir.
How would you characterize how it's helped you, and how would you characterize why it's important to share with people? What's your drive to serve?
Well, to answer your last question first, when you go down the path of meditation, a lot of people enter that path because they want to quiet the mind. They want to shut up those voices. And that's generally not why you meditate. And that's not really the goal of meditation, although it may happen. It's a funny thing about meditation is that the goal and what you're looking for and what you're trying to accomplish is not necessarily what you wind up accomplishing. And once you have conquered, or once you've gained some of the basic skills, which really does not take a long time. People think you have to sit on a cushion for years in a monastery, and it's not. We're talking 10 minutes a day for maybe a couple of weeks, just to get the basic understanding of the skills that you're going to use. Then from that point on, you start looking at different kinds of meditation for the purpose of cultivating different aspects of your personality, because what the old ancient masters found and what the brain scientists have found that concurs with it is that your two sides of the brain, your right and left prefrontal cortexes, they carry a lot of electrical activity in them. And if the right side, the negative side, the side that's your fight and flight response is housed in and the like, that's overly active, you tend to be negative and caustic and critical. The left side is the other side, which tends to be creative and healing and connected and those things. And what you want to have is you want to have balance. And what you then do after you get the basic skills is you start practicing cultivating things that activate that left side activity, things like loving kindness, like compassion, like healing, like wisdom, experience, looking awe, beauty, cultivating and curating your environment so that you build those things up almost as a balance, but certainly as an antidote to all of the survival, fear inducing things that come off the other side. And I say that long answer to tell you that when you begin to practice the loving kindness cultivation and you start to cultivate compassion, there really does come a time when you can feel your heart open. And there's a physical sensation that you actually can feel. And people describe it all different ways when you go to retreats. You know, people will chat about this and talk about it, and they'll look back at, oh yeah, I remember when that happened to me. And it's one of those big things that happens to you. But once that happens, the funny thing about it is all that you really want to do with your life is to ease the suffering of others. And that just becomes what you want to do in your life. And so that's that answer.
Beautiful. I should, for purposes of transparency, note that I've been fortunate enough to get to spend a lot of hours in meditative settings for many, many years now, and then start the day meditating with my wife, and our probably our most consistent practices come out of Thich Nhat Hanh's monastic tradition in terms of Plum Village and
right.
Zen Buddhism, Deer Park, all of that type of thing. And the I found the loving kindness practices really challenging initially, and wanted to kind of flag it as we keep learning from you today, and our audience learns from you. And I thank them for joining us. That I had this presumption, well, I'm a nice guy, so I must have a loving kindness sort of radiating heart. But like many of us, then the meditative practices led to this realization about a lot of negativity, a lot of judgment of both myself and others, sort of black and white thinking, which I think is pretty common in Western industrialized culture. And we could go on for days about where it comes from. I think the answers are more interesting than where the problems come from. But I was really challenged. One of the practices that stood out to me was sort of envisioning loving kindness for somebody that I already had affection for, and then somebody I felt neutral for, and then somebody that I had an antagonistic conflict-based relationship with. And that was really helpful. And now we've done hundreds of rounds of loving kindness meditation. I try to incorporate it in my daily way of being. I did have a remarkable moment when a person was really critical of me and my medical team, a family member. And I was so glad to have done all this loving kindness work, because 15 years ago, I would have just pushed back and gotten defensive. But I just felt, I think I did feel in my heart this, the person's pain. And so I remember just stopping and saying, I hear you. So I love how we're sort of, it's like we're cultivating the garden of our hearts with these consistent practices, and then the things that arise can be some of the best things in life.
Yeah, it is something that you have, and as you practice it, you own it, and it shows up, in large ways and little ways. Just a couple, well, it was just yesterday, matter of fact. I was with my wife. We went on a couple of weeks vacation in Costa Rica, and we were living in a small little cramped area, and we were on top of each other, let's just say. And we and my wife is she's definitely a very type A, task oriented person, and I'm a very timing person. Our sense of timing is quite different. I like to let things sit until they're ripe and are easy to be plucked. And she wants to get it done just to get it off her desk. And we just see things somewhat differently about that. Anyway, I was doing something, and it was annoying her. And when it came, she was staying in Costa Rica for a little while to enjoy her girlfriends, and I was coming back to do some work. And when we went to the airport, she was a bit sour. And she said, "Well, I'm just tired." And I said, "Well, there's something else going on." And she said, "Yes, but I don't want to talk about it." And anyway, so we talked on the phone yesterday, and she started to go through her list and litany of things that I had done that had upset her. And as you said, at another time in my life, I would have defended myself and made an argument, and I would have, said, "Yeah, well, you this and you that," and come back and looked at how fair and just what she was saying was. But instead, I recognized my desire to want to do that, and my loving kindness thinking. I mean, the heart, said to me, spoke to me and said, "No, just listen to her." And so I just sat back and I just listened to her, and she finished up her thing. And then, when she was all done and she had it all out and she felt that she was heard, she started talking about some other good things that were happening, and we ended up with "I love yous" and goodbye. And it could have gone a very different way, but it didn't. And I attribute that to the training, because it would have been different at another time.
Awesome. Well, that brings up the word flow to me, which I very much want to get into, and awe. Those are two I want to get on our docket for today's discussion. Let's do one thing, though, that I think is always super helpful to people, because so many people could benefit from meditation, and so many people in Western industrialized societies, their main stumbling block is what you flagged when we started. They think that it's to quiet the mind. And as they start in the mind, instead uh, they're they're fully present with the noise and the chaos. Then
Yes.
they're intimidated and they stop. And I did that in college. Somebody encouraged me to meditate. I put a candle on the windowsill, and 7 minutes in, that was it. Didn't come
That was
back to
it.
meditation for decades.
Right.
And then was fortunate enough to have really good teachers. And so I'm really, really comfortable with and enjoy now being present with my mind. So can you share with us, as an expert, sort of a way for people to conceptualize befriending this practice and how to sort of step into it? Because most of the rest of today's discussion will either be for meditators or people that are going to continue on to the practice. And but I'd really like to reassure and invite folks that are intimidated that are taking that step, kind of how to frame it or contextualize it.
So I would say a good way to contextualize it is to realize that we all have meditated and continue to meditate all the time. We're doing it all the time. We just don't notice it, and we don't call it that. But of course, I'm sure, like everyone else, like me, uh, have been listening to somebody, and it was really your intention to listen to them. You wanted to hear what they had to say. But even so, your mind drifted off, and it started thinking about whether you left the stove on or what was going to be for dinner. But at some point, you noticed that you weren't listening to the person. And when that noticing came about, it was almost as if there was a little O attached to it, like, oh, almost a little startle. And I like to call that startle waking up. Because what happened is you had drifted into this fog of rumination and projection that we are in most of the time. But then because, you had formed an intention to want to hear this person, your mind kind of whispered to you, psst, psst, hey, you're not listening. and you kind of wake up, and then your mind is flooded with a series of judgments, like, oh, I should have been listening to him and I didn't hear what he had to say, and what if he finds out that I wasn't listening to him, and I don't want to be rude, and you have this flood of judgments. And then eventually that flood quiets down and you go back to listening to him. Another time you'll be reading and you realize you don't remember a word you read over the last 3 pages. So, but then you do notice that you don't remember, that you weren't paying attention. So that is the process of meditation. That's exactly what we do in meditation. We say that we're going to pay attention to the candle, and then our mind gets lost in a fog of rumination and projection. But because we said we wanted to pay attention, our mind eventually goes, psst, psst, hey, you're not paying attention to the candle. And you go, ooh, ooh. And then you have a flood of judgments, and you go back and you listen and you start watching the candle. Then your mind goes off again, and you come back and you begin again. And your mind goes off again, and you come back and you begin again. So you might ask, well, why would you want to do that? I mean, it seems like a stupid thing to do. I mean, why would you want to do that? Well, the difference is that when you are listening to the fellow and your mind wandered, it just did it, and it happened, and it was like on auto drive. But when you do it with intentionality, when you set it up and you do it, you're noticing it happening. You're watching the process of going into the fog and coming out of the fog. And as you watch that process happening, you begin to become more familiar with that weird part of you that watches your thinking. And as you do this little practice, this very little simple practice, you become more and more familiar with this watcher, this observer, this, some people, if they're spiritual, might even call it your soul, but let's not go there. But there is this thing. And what you find is that as you do this little practice for a couple of weeks, all of a sudden, you come to this great realization that I'm not my thoughts, that I have thoughts, that these are just things that I have, that they're little blips of electricity that kind of flow through my brain. And I've been like, my whole life has been controlled by these things that I can't hold them in my hand. I can't sell them. I can't trade them for anything. They're just little blips of something that's here and that's gone. And it's been controlling my whole life. And as you begin to come to this internal realization of this, all of a sudden, the possibility of what you can be, the fact that you are so much more than your thought, it becomes evident to you. I could tell you this all day, and it won't mean very much. But if you sit and you just let it happen, you will discover it on your own. And when that happens, all of a sudden there is a freedom that washes over you like nothing you've experienced before.
Yeah, a freedom and an expansiveness, which is what so many are thirsty for.
Yes, so many, so many. So that we do that. And then the other thing that we do that we notice in contextualizing is, like, a lot of times we're talking, and even as we're talking, we're thinking, oh, this isn't going very well, or I could be saying this better, or this isn't coming out, or that isn't what I meant. So we are already, familiar with that commentator that's back there, that the observer. And so like I say, we're meditating all the time. So, but we don't get the benefit of it because we're not doing it on purpose. And the only difference is that this time we're going to like watch our mind on purpose
Mm-hmm.
and get the benefit of it.
Mm-hmm. The
Well,
action of
it's like
bringing
we're
things into
wasting. It's like we're wasting the benefit of all of these experiences that are happening. They're flowing right by, and we're not grabbing hold of them and making use of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Did you pick a certain tradition of meditation, or is the one that you found first the one that you fell in love with? Does it matter which meditation tradition people follow, given that there are so many, or is it more, um, is it more just that it's a trustworthy tradition and there are many?
Mm. Well, I think that there are some that have different goals in mind, like transcendental meditation, which I know very little about. I admit, I mean, I from what I understand, has the goal of bringing you to a different state of consciousness. I don't know what that state of I can say I don't know much about it, but that's one thing. There are other meditations, meditation schools that have other purposes. Um, and inside of each school, there are many techniques. I guess the school that I'm familiar with, I guess we call insight meditation. And it's the meditation taught by Tara Branch and Jack Cornfield and
Mm-hmm.
that whole slew of folks,
Mm-hmm.
which is really all about just watching the mind and learning from your internal wisdom.
Mm,
Um, and uh,
beautiful.
and within that, you have walking meditation and belly breathing and body scans and loving
Mm-hmm.
kindness, compassion, forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
I love the way Jack Cornfield teaches the forgiveness meditation. It's one of the
Mm-hmm.
most powerful meditations that was ever there. And when you think about uh, the teachings of Lord Jesus, I mean, they came. Should I forgive this person 7 times? He was asked. He goes, no, 7 times 70. And so even
Mm,
the power of forgiveness is amazing.
mm. I love it how when people do take the step, because as you said, we can invite them, but they have to experience for themselves. And one of my favorite things that happens is that they quit being harsh with
Mm,
themselves. And that might be my favorite moment, actually, when I hear them say something about, I would say there's epidemic levels of being harsh with
hmm
ourselves. And again, we could conjecture for a long time about where that comes from, but it's a great moment when I hear them say something about, so such and
hmm
such happened, and I wasn't hard on myself. I just flowed with it, or I realized it's an old pattern or something like that. I should say it's a really interesting day. You just came back from Costa Rica. I'm leaving next week for a yoga and functional medicine retreat in Costa Rica, the first time I've ever had the privilege of doing that. And then my wife is literally this week wrapping up 2 years with Tara Brock and Jack Cornfield doing
Oh,
their program. And
hmm
so I have the great good fortune to have a uh, her teacher James, who has specialty training in helping young people. He's a couple of times referred to her as the Bodhisattva he knows in Homer, right? And so that just meant so much to her uh, to hear that. So it's been great these evening conversations we have about teaching young people to meditate and just that whole tradition that they come from, which is brilliant.
hmm
So
Can I go back to something that
yeah,
you mentioned a
yeah.
moment ago, though? You mentioned about being kind to ourselves. Now, I wound up marrying, she now refers to her as a recovering Southern Baptist, Bible literalist. And, but she herself, she is a bodhisattva. But she does believe in the Bible literally, and we are far apart in our cosmologies, but very, very close in our values. But anyway, so she brought me to the examination of a lot of tenets of Christianity. And one of the things, whenever I teach in churches and in Christian settings, I mention the two great commandments that Jesus left with us. One is to love your God with all of your heart, your soul, and your mind. And the other is to love your neighbor as yourself. And the wording is very important there. And I mentioned to them, I said, well, if your mind is full of recriminations and judgments, if it's lost in a fog of rumination and projection, if you're thinking about what the fella should have said yesterday and why you didn't do this and all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, how much room is left in your heart, in your mind, to love God? And so when Jesus gave you that commandment, was he not also commanding that you clean up your mind? I mean, clean it up in terms of, organizing it maybe a little bit better so that you have more of it available. And
Mm-hmm.
so that maps on good. But what really maps on is my question: if you are commanded to love your neighbor as yourself, how does that work if you don't love yourself? And if you are full of self-judgment, does that mean you have been commanded to be judging of your neighbor? And that leads to a wonderful, wonderful conversations. Again, the Marlboro Man and that icon of American masculinity and pulling yourself
Mm-hmm.
up by your bootstraps and all of
Mm-hmm.
that, those things come up. And am I deserving of it? And am I being selfish? There's all of these obstacles. But if you
Mm-hmm.
simply say, well, can you not just love you the way God loves you?
Mm-hmm.
And that maps on well, and it gives a good reason why we should spend time being gentle with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost as if if God set up this wonderful, wonderful system where we have all this great opportunity to learn how to be gentle with ourselves so that we can learn how to be gentle in community, so that we can learn how to be gentle in the spiritual side of things. What a great system
Yeah.
set up. And
Yeah.
so
Awesome. Absolutely. We just need to stop for a second and just feel what you said. I hope everybody listening just stops and lets that settle for a minute. It's an incredible invitation. I think it's also an incredible challenge.
mhm,
The the years I've been in practice, 24 years now as an attending physician, a really big aha moment was that people who are suicidal don't choose to stay alive because they love themselves. They choose to stay alive for the people they love to show up for. So that sometimes opens a window into reverse engineering this. And if we have trouble loving ourselves, we
mhm.
sometimes can leverage the love of others and who we want to show up for to do the right thing and love ourselves, sort of fake it till we make it, as they would say
Right,
in
right, right.
AA.
Mhm,
And then I had the privilege of being at Harvard many, many years ago on the campus there where the Benson Henry Institute is. And I've always been fascinated by Herb Benson at Harvard, who published these studies on the epigenetic benefits of where we turn on the heal genes with meditation and we turn off the disease, stress distress genes.
mhm,
And when I attended there 15 years ago or so for a week, he came in at the beginning of the first class, and that was really something, just hearing his story of persisting and persevering at Harvard when they tried to get rid of him in the 70s. But they talked about how they have a policy there that when people do the class, they can come back and do the class again. These are the participants now, the people learning to meditate there at the Benson Henry Institute, if they're willing to be a mentor for others when somebody breaks down,
mhm,
because
mhm.
invariably somebody's going to start meditating and then something's going to come to the surface of consciousness because it's finally ready.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's also really cool that there's a courage to go ahead and look at our lives, the beauty, the radiance, and also the pain,
Mm-hmm.
and let the things arise that need to arise into the light of consciousness. Just bringing things into the light of consciousness is that, what's that almost cliched phrase, light's the best disinfectant. Just bringing things into the light of consciousness is really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I had a student, because I'm fortunate that Elon has now took a little pushing, but now they've now given me a 2 credit course that students can take, a meditation course. It's not guised as mindful leadership or anything else. It's just straight meditation, and I get to teach it for in a 2 credit course. And I had a student. Of course, it's an elective. Why would it ever be a requirement? Of course, it's an elective. So the people that take it are all self-selecting, and usually they come in and they express a sense of overwhelm, of anxiety. I had a lot of perfectionists come
Mm-hmm.
into that course,
Mm-hmm.
and so this one young lady was in the course, and the way that I teach it, they developed a system at Duke University, which is beyond marvelous. They developed an entire digital infrastructure, and the way the course is laid out, that you meet with them once a week and teach 2 or 3 different techniques. They get an app that was created at Duke, which if you're certified, you get access to. The guided meditations are on the app, but what makes it different is that as soon as they finish the meditation, they are asked to log their experience. And that log comes to my dashboard every single day. And I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, every morning when I have class, and I look at the 15 logs from my students and I answer them with coaching. Sometimes it's just good job. There's nothing I need to say. You did fine. Other times it's paragraphs where we're talking about the use of language, and can we possibly let go of the word focus and concentrate and maybe use some other word like wandering, things like that. But every single day I get to respond, so that there is this ongoing dialogue with their teacher that makes the 5 or 6 weeks of the class so much more productive. And this one student was not logging, and I asked her to stay after class and mentioned. I said, you took it as an elective, so clearly you have a sense that there's some benefit that's available to you here. And I'm sure that that when you go to the gym, you can't just look at the machines. You actually got to get on them. You actually got to get on them and work them. And so I noticed that you're not logging, and so it was interesting how it progressed from. It's funny. I always seem to know what I need, but I never seem to have the motivation to. And it was couched in all these words of generalism. And we kept asking, and I kept asking her, well, tell me what the words are that that you're hearing in the actual. Don't describe them to me. Tell me exactly what words you're using. And as she started to describe the words, she became more aware that there was something that was more nefarious than just simply I don't happen to. It was I sabotage myself. And then from there it went on, and then all of a sudden the dam broke open. The tears came. She broke down into tears, and it turned out that she simply said, "I just don't believe I deserve to be happy." And again, I'm using meditation tools. What are the meditation tools? So I asked her, where do you feel that? Where in your body? Where's the body sensation? That where? And of course, in the beginning, most of us are so unconnected to our bodies that, oh, I feel it all over, or I just feel pressure. But I kept asking, no, where? And it was funny. It was really kind of weird. I finally identified this spot that was about 2 inches underneath her left collarbone. And she said, it's not my heart. It's not my heart. It's this spot right here. And it feels like it ought to be throbbing, but it's not throbbing. And as she described it to me, all of the emotion kind of faded away. It became an academic exercise now. She was now in the present moment. She wasn't catastrophizing and thinking off into the future. She wasn't reflecting on all of the past things. She was just here and now looking at what body sensations that she had was. And all of a sudden, she just realized that there was nothing going on at this moment that gave rise to the intensity of the emotions that she had been expressing. And it was like, hello, huh? And then we started talking about, how emotions are body sensations and thoughts and the combination of it. But that was such an important moment to her, where all of a sudden she realized that she had a say in the matter of how she felt, which was a completely brand new concept to her. And by the end of the class, she was logging every day. And, she wound up. And when I got her final reflection at the end, she said, I'm going to take this into the rest of my life. And I'll never forget this.
Such a cool story. Yeah. Yeah, that's the best. That's the best when it's transformative. You're there at that bottleneck, and then the other side of it is different in character than what led up to it. That's the change. And it's self-perpetuating. Yeah. Love that. Well, let's make sure and talk about awe and flow. Let's give people a peek into the goodies that await them if they take this journey.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, I had this therapist, and the therapist was the English language editor of Master Watching Me, a Taoist master, 72nd generation. I kind of calculated that out. For 1,400 years or so, his family had been handing this wisdom down, from generation to generation for 1,400 years. And just sort of wrap your head around that. Anyway, most amazing man. And we asked him once, they say, well, they call you Master Nee. Why do they call you Master? Getting with him. And he was one of those fellas, he would say something and then chuckle and walk off. He said, well, because I have mastery of life. I go, oh, okay. Well, what does that look like? And he said, when you can interfere the least and have the greatest impact. Okay, that was a simple explanation. But in that, he was speaking to this whole concept of flow. And flow, part of it is timing. Part of it is, well, there's two pieces to the flow. One is recognizing the characteristic of the flow itself. We think of going with the flow, but we never really spend time with saying, well, what is the flow? Because, I could be floating downstream. It's certainly better than not paddling upstream. But, downstream, it could be calm. It could be white water. I could be going towards a waterfall. It could be a flood. It could be very dry, running on rocks. So, the path downstream also requires attention, and it requires a recognition of what is being called for. And then it requires an alignment with that. And that is the essence of what Taoism is. Taoism studies this yin yang, this flow of energy, which is the flow. I mean, it is, the whole idea of yin and yang, the poles of a battery, the negative and positive poles of a battery creating a flow. That is the flow that Taoism speaks of. And it is identifiable in human behavior in situations that can be identified and actually named. So there might be a time for great advance, and there might be a time of retreat, and there might be a time of calculated waiting, and there might be a time of punching through, and there might be a time of community, and there might be a time of solidarity, and there might be a time of brotherhood, and there might be a time of isolation. And there may be all of these different flows, and the great wisdom of Taoism and the teaching of the, of the writings and what people, engage with it, is to be able to understand and recognize the flow and then align yourself with it so that you interfere the least and have the greatest impact. So I guess the greatest metaphor would be swimming into shore from out in the ocean and understanding that the tide moves towards the shore and it moves away from the shore. And so when it is going in the direction you want to go in, when it's going forward, that's the time to swim like heck. Use your energy and use every bit of energy that you can take advantage of. This is the time to do it. But then it will turn around and go against you. So the wise thing is not to fight it. And it's also not to give into it so it sweeps you back out to sea, but to expend only that amount of energy that's necessary to hold your position. And wait and be patient until the tide changes, and then swim like heck and hold, and swim like heck and hold. And that way you get to shore having exerted the least amount of interfering the least in the natural flow and having the greatest impact. And if you can do that, well, I had a great mentor in the law, Judge Kogan, and I once asked him how he always seems to be so calm in everything when everybody else is running around, in chaos. And he said, well, Bob, it's kind of like this. That you can go and try to pick a green apple, and you're going to twist and you're going to pull and you're going to, twist and shake and pull, and you're going to use a lot of energy. And when you get it, it's going to be sour. Or you can wait and it'll drop and rot. But if you pick it at the right time, it comes off easy and it's sweet.
That's great. That is absolutely great.
So, and it shows up a lot between my wife and I, because again, my wife is, and I love her for it, and she balances me out. And it's not a criticism in any way, because she's very task oriented. And I am so fortunate that I can come up with a big picture or a concept of something and then just turn it over to her, and she makes it happen and brings it into the world. And it is such a blessing for me. But at the same time, her sense of timing causes her to do a lot of unnecessary work. She always wants to get the task done. And sometimes if you would just wait, you would find out that the task doesn't need to be done at all. There's that.
Well, there's some great science now that awe is one of the most therapeutic things ever, including for immunity, which is a very salient topic nowadays. So share your thoughts on awe, if you would, and then we'll wrap up with how people can find you.
Okay. Well, from what I understand, awe is kind of the positive counter force to PTSD. It's not as powerful because, you know, our survival instincts, you know, and our need to be safe is a much more powerful driving force than that of curating beauty. But nevertheless, my understanding is that awe can change the wiring of your brain instantaneously, although we may have to work at it and we may have to, you know, relive it and put some energy into reinforcing it. But nevertheless, awe, and I think in, you know, in the Christian world, you know, they speak of that, they use the term thin spaces, these moments when you feel that there is very little separating you from the great universal intelligence, this sense of wonderful connection and of awe. And I think that the beautiful part of awe is that it can be curated and it can be learned. And just like everything else, it may be more difficult to bring yourself to that place where you have that sense washes over you. May be more difficult, but if you expose yourself to it, you know, again and again, it becomes easier and easier. And you know, these days, quite frankly, I find that I cry a lot. Um, just the other day, I got on the plane, and it was one of these real long planes. And I was sitting up front, and I had to go to the bathroom. And I'm walking down the aisle, and I'm seeing all of these faces that are sitting there. And all of a sudden, the idea that we've heard them say in the movies, yes, I'm flying a plane, and there are 24 souls on board. We've heard that say. It became real to me that these are souls, that they're there. And when I got to the back, you know, I said to the stewardess, "Thank you for being responsible for all of these people, because they are in your responsibility now." And I'm just in awe of that. And and so even little things like that can bring you to that place where you can allow that to wash over you. And every morning you ask, you know, are there any practices? Every morning I get up and go to the gym. I meet some buddies at 6 o'clock, but before that, I get my dogs, go down the street here to where there's an elementary school, and we sit in the back so I can watch the sun come up. And I have a little saying, you know, that I remind myself that I'm trading a day of my life for this day. And there's a lot fewer in front of me than there are behind me at 75. And that there should be something I leave in the day that's important, because I'm trading a day of my life for it. And I remind myself of that in the morning, and I watch my dogs play. And God knows, you know, if you ever want to be happy, just get a dog. You know?
They're the masters.
They are the best. And so that's how I start my day. And I constantly and always just reminding that all of that is there and it's available.
Terrific. Well, where can people find you, Bob, and learn more about what you do and benefit from programs that you have or that sort of thing?
So I put everything together into one website to make it easy, and it's at awiseandhappylife.com. And there's a bit about me and the classes, but more importantly, if you're interested in meditation at all, I've got a couple of free downloadable ebooks, you know, what it is, how to get started, full of resources, you know, no salesmanship. I'm not trying to sell anything. Just everybody asks me all those questions, you know, where can I find out more? So put it all in a book and click on it and download it. I wrote a couple of books and whatever you may want to know. But more importantly, if there's any questions you have or you'd like to get in touch with me, there is a place to click and set up a 15-minute phone chat, and I'm more than happy to chat with any of your audience.
Really a privilege to spend time with you today. Very inspiring. You made my day, and I'm sure you're going to make a lot of people's day who check this out.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for the Seaworthy podcast. Seaworthy exists to help people overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. If you think we've earned it, please consider giving this podcast a like, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating on the platform of your choice. Thanks.